We'd like to start by acknowledging that this talk is being broadcast to you from a variety of different lands of First Nations people, from the Wurundjeri tribes of the Kulin Nation to the lands of the Maui Nina people, and all the way to the beautiful Aotearoa, where you meet today. We pay our respects to all elders, past, present, and future, and acknowledge the important connection they have with the lands that we meet across today. So kia ora, everyone. Welcome to Build Studios, Not Games. Today, we'll be unveiling the secret ingredients of team leadership and studio culture. We'll do this by getting to know our four incredible panelists. You'll meet a drama student turned co-founder, a film producer turned CEO, a journalist turned head of QA, and a graphic designer turned studio director. So let's get stuck into it. Let's go around the table and meet our panelists, starting with the brilliant Chantel.
Hi everyone, I'm Chantel. I'm the studio director / CEO at Dinosaur Polo Club. We're the Wellington-based indie studio behind the award-winning games Mini Metro and Mini Motorways. And like most indies, I wear many hats in my role. At the studio, I do a bunch of things from people and culture, business and government relationships, wider partner relationships, legal accounts, you name it. But I generally love connecting with people and have over 10 years of experience across creative industries. Most people, however, know me for my love of tea and my pet Flemish giant rabbit, Lilu. That's me.
And Liam.
My name's Liam Esler. I am the Managing Director of Summerthorpe Studios here in Melbourne, Australia. I'm very far from you right now, and I'm very sad that we don't get to be there with you all today. We are currently working on a little game called Chorus, an Adventure Musical, which has been a really wild ride over the past couple of years and still has a little while to go. But yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Imms. I'm the Quality Assurance Director for Mighty Kingdom. I've been working in software QA for about 20 years, but as Kerry mentioned earlier, I did take a little break in the middle to work as a games journalist, which is weird. Ask me about it sometime. Unfortunately, not in person in New Zealand, but maybe another time. It'd be great.
And finally, Zoe.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Zoe. I'm the CEO at Runaway Play. We make mobile games inspired by nature. And we've been around for about 10 years. We've got 5 live games, soon to be 6 next week, which is very exciting. We're releasing our latest title, Old Friends Dog Game, which we are very excited about. So all of our games are based on the natural world, and we have a wonderful team of 30 people in Dunedin who I am very grateful to get to work with.
Fantastic. All right, let's get stuck into it. So to start us off, what's a unique skill set you have that you regularly use in your studio or career? And I'm going to start this off with Zoe.
Yeah, I think probably something from my background is that I had a very close friend say to me many years ago that I thrive in chaos. And I think that's something that a lot of us working in game dev can relate to, and something that's also very relevant to my background in film production. So in film production, you always need to have like a backup plan and another backup plan and another backup plan and another backup plan. And I think that that's been really helpful coming into game dev, where there's so much going on and things change and things are live and things go wrong, or you walk into a meeting and suddenly there's a whole bunch of different people in there than who you expected. And then you're like, giving Emma the eye to change the slides on the go while you distract them by talking about something else. So I think having that ability to be really flexible and really agile and change, but also from film production being pretty organized and doing a lot of planning and organization. And those two things oddly go very well together.
Does anyone else feel that thriving in chaos is a very common skill set in game development?
And a necessity, yeah.
Not to mention being involved in small business, which is a significant part of like many indie game developers' journey as well.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, look, I think Zoe, you kind of hit something on the head there, which was you need to wear lots of hats, and people bring a lot of experience from other backgrounds to the party. And that's something I think is really important and not enough of the conversation to my mind in the games scene. Like, people should feel okay about their backgrounds, and importantly, not feel like they've failed if they need to leave games for a time. Like, if games isn't for you right now for whatever reason, if there's not an opportunity for you right now, you haven't failed somehow by taking a job somewhere else and skilling up in a related industry and then bringing those skills back to games later, if that's where life takes you. I think that's actually really powerful and makes you a lot more attractive to employers.
I completely agree. And that's something that I definitely have said to some of our staff who choose to leave. Is something that nobody ever said to me, was that to change your mind isn't a failure. And I think that that's like really, really important. And equally, I totally agree that other skill sets are so relevant and so important in games. And we have a lot of people in our studio who have come from careers outside of games and transitioned in, and they bring wonderful skill sets with them.
Yeah, I'd actually be happy to talk a little bit about my previous background from outside of games. So originally I was a graphic designer, and then a business relationship manager, and I gained experience in positively managing the expectations of external partners. And one of the simplest mistakes I see in a lot of businesses, particularly small ones, is saying yes to something unrealistic based on a fear of losing out on an opportunity if we try to negotiate. It's particularly when working with someone like a really huge publishing partner, it can be very easy to fall into that trap of saying yes when we should be having a conversation around what's realistic for our teams. I believe this is a trait that's partly responsible for the crunch culture seen in a lot of creative industries. And it's something that we can change by simply being honest but positive in our delivery about what we can do. And by doing that, you can actually move a lot of deadlines or reduce the size of a project. And that's something I found I learned a lot through that client background that I had before I came into games. People value working with a company that is honest and able to determine what is a reasonable amount of work for their team.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that a lot of my previous experience with stuff like that has been massively helpful as I've sort of come into starting a games company. I think like my background started in sort of drama, and then actually did a bunch of graphic design as well, which I don't know why anyone ever hired me. I was so bad at it, honestly. But somehow I managed to sort of get into game development, and over the course of the last decade, I've had the opportunity to explore almost every facet of game development myself, from sort of like engineering to scripting to narrative design to production. A really unfortunate stint in audio design, which nobody should ever let me do, and I think that that's probably my secret superpower, is that I've done a lot of the different parts of the game development pipeline. And so I can speak a little bit of the language of every kind of game developer. And sort of as a former producer and now sort of a studio manager and director, like that communication element is so core to what I do every day. Like, I regularly need to be able to interpret from programming to art to audio and make sure that everyone's on the same page. And I attribute a lot of that actually to, being from drama and having studied drama in university. You need to learn how to communicate.
Go drama kids.
There are so many of us in games.
Yeah, and that stuff's really vital too, especially as your studio scales. I think like we're scaling at the moment, and that's going great. But as we're bringing more people into the studio that have had a very specific background, they're not super aware of how a tech artist works, or how pick another role that they're not familiar with. Not having those communication and translation skills is definitely a challenge. So that's something which we're trying to work out right now, is how can we get that information shared and do it in a way that's respectful of everyone's time, but a way that's easy to consume and valuable for everyone. It's definitely a huge challenge. It's a great skill to have, Liam.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like that idea that, if we have that more diverse background, if we pop in and out of games, as long as we're diversifying our skill set, we know a little bit about every role, it makes us better, more empathetic leaders. I really love that idea. So I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, who or what inspired you to take a position of leadership? And I'm going to have Chantel lead on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think throughout my career, I've had some really inspiring leaders and some amazing women around me who I've been able to look up to. These people taught me a lot about leadership along the way, the value of comfortable and open dialogue, empathy, transparency, organization, and the balance needed in a company in order to create and support a healthy and happy team. So really, it was through the encouragement of these people in my life that led me here. I've always felt like a comfortable communicator and a people person, but I'm also someone not afraid to plan for all scenarios while keeping a positive attitude and knowing that we can adjust as needed. I think one of the most important things that I've learned is that we never stop learning. We can always be better. And with these thoughts in mind, I hope to always be a positive influence on those around me, just like the leaders that inspired me to take this sort of position in my career.
Yeah, I think for me, it was like leadership kind of happened without me realizing it, to be honest. It just sort of, I have a habit of just sort of taking charge of situations, usually without people getting pissed off, usually. Then sort of after I've been around for a little while, I kind of realized that there weren't many gay people in leadership positions in Australia and New Zealand, particularly within games. And that was a really big problem for me. And so I wanted to sort of be the example, I guess, and got lucky enough to have opportunities to do that. I think that plus my natural inclination to sort of help encourage cooperation, as in like be really bossy. And my experiences of having like really shitty bosses and really toxic work situations and work environments led me to think like, I think I can do this. Like, I think I can do this better based on these experiences and my skill set and ability. And I don't know, hopefully that'll bear fruit, but I'd like to think it does.
I wonder if some of that, I share a lot of that, like I wonder if part of that comes from being the drama kid, but you know, that like kind of just tendency to be the person that ends up leading a situation is definitely something that everyone who knows me will say I do in every single area of my life. And I think, I remember when I was working in television production and my executive producer sent a whole bunch of us to a workshop on what it was to be a producer. And that was really my first experience of what a kind of more of a leadership role would be. And I went to this workshop and I walked out of it and I walked up to her and I said, okay, that was great. I now know what I never, ever want to do. I never want to do that job. So thanks for sending me, because now I know I don't want to do it. And then about 6 months later, I suddenly realized that that was the exact job I was doing on every single project I was involved in, like both at work and all the projects I was doing outside of work in my personal life. And I was like, oh, hang on. So like you, I kind of stumbled into it through, I guess, some of that natural inclination, and then found that, again, I also had experiences of other bosses that I really did not respect because of the way that they treated people around them. And I really wanted to try to do better. And so that was kind of what led me in.
I had a boss once who really didn't like being a leader, but he said he cheated. Like the way he cheats is he would just hire good people and then give them what they need to be awesome and then just get out of their way. And that was how he cheated at being a leader. And I was kind of really impressed by that idea. And then later on in my career, after doing some leadership training and things, started to think, gee, what if you did that, but also enjoyed it? What if you could actually inspire the people around you to be even more awesome than they already are? So surrounding yourself with awesome people is great. And then kind of giving them the space to run with it, I think is kind of the philosophy that I'm trying out, and it seems to be working. I really believe in it. But he was definitely an inspiration for me, not because he was a terrible leader, but because he had a great way of avoiding taking. It was almost like he was trying to shed the spotlight a little bit by shining onto his team. I think that's a really fun idea, leading from the back a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're about to say the same thing, which which is, I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about leadership, and one of those things that I think as a person who does end up sort of tending to lead things, for me, it's not about like me doing the things. It's about me going, I can see that all of you need these bits. And if I can help you all to have these things, then you can all do the thing. And that's like so exciting to be able to do that with people. So I tend to describe my job as being the person that makes sure that everyone else has what they need to do their jobs, because we do have amazing people. And if you just make sure that they have everything they need and that all the communication channels are in place, that everyone has the information, then it all runs. And you should be doing like less and less ideally, right? And it's like with every hire, particularly as the studio grows, I'm really conscious of, let's hire people who are better at doing the things that people who are wearing many hats are doing, so that we can keep, you know, building those skill sets.
Yeah, I really live by the maxim, like, surround yourself with people smarter than you. And I think that that applies to building a studio. It's like, we need to be working ourselves out of jobs. You know, I am not the best at what I do by any stretch of the imagination, but what I can do is hopefully put together people who are, and then support them. And sort of, I like to think of my job as like filling in the cracks and making sure that like everything's supported so the road is smooth, and that way everyone can traverse it.
Fantastic. I really like that everyone sort of is building towards this mentality of like, be the leader that you always wanted. I like fill that sort of gap that you see in the industry. It's really inspiring to sort of see that that's all the direction that we're heading. And it's nice that we don't have egos. Like it's really great that, you know, we all understand that idea that, you know, as a leader, you should make your skill set redundant. Like all the things that you were the specialist at, you should be passing that on to other people, so that, you know, that if your studio can operate without you, in a way, that's the sign of success, not failure. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question now, which is, why do game studios even exist? Why do we not just wrap after we finished a game? And I'm going to get Jason to lead this one.
I think some studios do that, for starters. Like, I think there are a few examples now of studios that were put together to make a thing and then maybe achieve some other goal that was associated with releasing a game. It wasn't necessarily the release of the game and then making more. So that's one kind of idea. But I think the other one is just growth. And I don't mean in like studio size, I mean personal growth with the team. Because when you complete something, you learn heaps. When you actually take a game from concept all the way to shipping it and actually do the hard work of shipping it at the end, you learn a huge amount. And then if you just wrap at the end and don't stay together, all of those lessons kind of get dispersed and become more diluted and less valuable. But if you stay together, you can grow in it. And if you really proactively try and bring more lessons in from the outside by engaging consultants and investing in the studio in that way, but bringing more knowledge in from the outside, I think it's incredibly valuable, as long as you've maintained good, healthy and non-toxic relationships inside the studio.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think as a team, the way you communicate only gets stronger the more that you understand the personalities in your team and the goals that you share and the goals of those around you. So if you can create a culture where everyone is supporting each other in their growth, why give that up at the end of a project? A studio and a job within one is so much more than just the revenue or the salary you earn along the way. And we spend so much of our lives working. Why not spend that time with people that can help you be your best self? Each year at Dinosaur Polo Club, actually, we determine our studio-wide goals and our individual goals, and we work towards them together. And these help us shape what type of projects we want to undertake and what we do as individuals within those projects. And what we've learned is that everything we do is teaching us something. And when a project comes to an end, we're then able to make the most out of that accumulated knowledge and combine it with our new goals that look towards what we want to learn next.
Zoe, did you have any thoughts on that? Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's two things. There's the business side and the personal side. And so on the business side, I think it's really clear that, like, for us at Runaway, definitely, we have learnt lessons from every single game. And as mobile free to play, it's very, KPI driven, and there's a lot of metrics and analytics. And so we are really using the data from every game that we ship to help make the next game better. And so I think, for us, if we were to just do a game and then not do, another one as the studio, then you kind of lose that progression. And then I think on the personal side, like for individuals' career progression, I think there's a real plus to build a studio as well, because in the same way that the studio learns from every game, each person is learning so much from each game project, and not just learning things, but trying things. So we really want at Runaway for people who come into the studio to be able to have their whole career within the studio if that's what they want. And so you don't have to leave the studio to take a step up or a step sideways. You should be able to do that within the team between the projects. And so by having the studio, people can say, hey, I really want to try some narrative design. And we can go, great, here, try it on this project. And then in the next project, they can take a bigger role. And then they're leading our narrative department. Hi, Lisa. So it's really cool to see that happen. So that's a big thing for me.
And I think I don't know, I think I'm gonna out myself as just like the biggest fucking fanboy of Runaway Play, because you all live that in a way that so few studios do. Like you talk the talk and you've walked the walk in so many ways, and so many of the people in your leadership positions started as juniors and then ended up as like art directors or narrative directors, and I think that that's such a huge strength for Runaway. And we see that at everywhere here, actually. But yeah, no, I just wanted to call it out because I've watched it for years, and it really is so impressive. And I think that sort of brings me to my points, which are like there are three main things for me that basically makes starting a studio worthwhile. And one of those is institutional knowledge, which a couple of people have mentioned. Another one is the efficiencies you learn as a team, you get faster. And the third one is the relationships you build. Like at the end of the day, these three things are what set any group of people apart, but particularly the relationships. So much of communication is relationship based. And so like at Summerfall, we have a really big emphasis on relationship building and informal relationship building and communication. And that's because so much of game development occurs outside of meetings and outside of work time, even when you're not necessarily talking about work, like just people hanging out and getting to know each other better, build stronger teams, stronger communication methods, people understand each other. It's learning like cues from other people, understanding when someone's frustrated, like when to step in, when to step out, like knowing how and when to have healthy disagreement. These are the things that I think that make a studio worthwhile long term, that having a single project just can't do.
Sure. And I think a lot of that comes from a combination of the macro lessons that we were talking about before. Zoe talking about the metrics and all that kind of stuff, and the long view on how a project went, but also the micro stuff. Like if you want to build a strong community within a team of people who work on a game or within a studio, they need to be constantly spending time together, talking about how they're going and how they're doing with the work. And so like at Mighty Kingdom, we do a lot of retrospectives, like the capital A Agile retrospectives. But they're really beautiful because they give the team a chance to say, this is what we are doing well at the moment. This is what we did well over the last 2 weeks. This is what we could be improving on. There's some areas of growth there. And also just a few moments to shout out some kudos to other members of the team. And when that process is working well, it's beautiful because you see the team growing together and kind of like housemates. Like if housemates don't see each other very often, tiny little problems about, oh, you always leave not enough water in the hot water cylinder or whatever, they just grow into these completely insurmountable problems. But when you're dealing with them regularly and actually taking the time to talk, it makes an incredible difference to the strength of that community, and therefore your ability to go ahead and make really beautiful things. So the macro and micro lessons are really valuable.
Fantastic. All right. Yeah, I really love the points that we've touched upon there. If you build an effective studio and you have excellent retention within your business, you really build towards that idea of studio knowledge. What are the learned things that the collective knowledge of all of your employees have at your studio? which is, builds towards that idea of personal growth. Something that I will mention as well, because Liam mentioned the Runaways excellent culture, is that's actually why you're all here today, is that I had a bit of a look online of studios that had studio culture that was so excellent that you could see it at a surface level. So you could see it on social media, you could see it on websites, and that's how I picked this panel. So yeah, I was immediately in love with Runaway the moment that I saw the social media for it and saw the little like M&M's jar and stuff like that.
Thanks, Sam Watson, for the M&Ms. She did the M&Ms on a day I was really stressed out. And I was like, oh, today is just like not going that well. And she was like, would something make it better? And I was like, maybe M&Ms. And then she came back from the supermarket with every single type of M&Ms that exist. She's amazing.
That's the sweetest.
Okay, so the next question that I want to ask, I'm going to direct at Liam, which is, what are the most common pitfalls of studios?
Oh my God, there's so
Yeah,
many.
gotcha.
So context background, part of what I used to do was work with the Game Developers Association of Australia, and a lot of that role was sort of working with various studios, and studios would come to us for support and to help work through issues. And so sort of over years working there, and then with a bunch of individual studios and consulting, I got to see like a lot of different game development outfits and how they worked and what they did well and what they didn't do well. And there were some really clear patterns there. And one of the things that I noticed often was there was something that people weren't understanding when they started a games studio. And that was that when you start a studio, your priority stops being making video games and becomes building a studio that makes video games. These are two fundamentally different ideas. And it's really, really important to acknowledge that, because it affects like every aspect of what we do. And part of that is fundamentally strategy. As studios, like we need to have strategies and plans. When you're making a game, you only need to think about the short term, like how does the development of this project sort of impact itself? Like how are we going to ship it? When you're putting together a studio, you have to think about that one and then the next 3 projects after that, and set yourself up for success in each of those. So, you need to think long term about each team member, their paths and growth within the business. You need to think about each project, how it contributes to the overall goals of the studio, what you learn. You need to think about what the studio does. What is it that your studio does that no other studio can do? Because that's how we're successful, right? In 2021, it's not enough to be good at making video games. Like we have to make unique, differentiated products for a given market. And it's a very different situation to a decade ago, and it's important to acknowledge that. And part of that is marketing, and how marketing becomes so much more crucial. And I'm not talking about PR or advertising, I'm talking about like fundamental product ideation. What does your studio make fundamentally? What differentiates your studio from others? Both from an offering perspective, so like hiring, like why should someone come work for you rather than someone else? But also from a product perspective. Like again, what is it that your studio does that no other studio does? One of the other common pitfalls is sort of just a lack of business skills. Most of us get into games wanting to make video games. I don't think a lot of people go and want to be like, I want to run a studio, because that means you don't get to make video games anymore. You run a studio. And that unfortunately means that a lot of us sort of go in and we learn on the job how to run a business. And so I think that it is really important to learn basic stuff like, God, I wish someone had taught me cash flow before I started a studio. I had no idea that my cash flow spreadsheet would be the most commonly used thing in my entire Google Drive. That's wild. And finally, a lot of people who run studios in games don't know what's going on with the industry. They don't follow what's happening, what the news is. I subscribe to over 6 different mailing lists, I think, for biz dev and marketing. 2 to 4 of which I read like every day on top of generalized gaming news. And some suggestions for anyone who wants them is Axios Gaming for general news, Master the Meta for business news, the Game Discovery Co for discoverability, marketing, Steam stuff, and Chris Sikowski's How to Market a Video Game newsletter. All of these are really, really good ones that almost everyone should check out. Because as studio leaders, it's our job to navigate the industry and the market, and to help our studio navigate that. It's important for us to know what's going on. And that can be pretty overwhelming, which is why you've got to do it constantly and make sure that you sort of, you can steer the ship.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that completely. I think that it's a common pitfall in this industry, is a lack of understanding about business. You touched on hiring a little bit earlier, and I think rushing your hiring process is also something that's an easy mistake to make. One person can have a huge impact on your entire team, no matter what size. So when you're hiring, you really want to be looking for people that are adding something new to your studio, be it a different background that has provided them with a unique point of view. And you want to combine that with communication skills, humility, and technical ability, yes, but potential is a really big one as well. I have a few things I can talk about in this topic. It's a juicy one. Making decisions without input from your team. I think it can be naive to think that you've thought of everything, and therefore seeking regular feedback from those around you allows you to tap into the brain power of an entire team of people, rather than just keeping it to your own noggin. Not explaining the why behind a decision is a really easy one to make. In any team, you'll have a number of different outcomes that people are hoping for. For example, some might prefer one feature be added to a game over another, but by explaining the why behind a reason, you enable your team to understand that their thoughts and wishes have been heard, but you also provide them with the insight needed to go forward with confidence that multiple elements have been considered before a decision has been made. Lack of balance and diversity is a massive one. In my experience, the more a business has diversity and representation, the more of a happy environment, a more communicative, a more empathetic environment it becomes. We are creating products for people all around the world. And so if we really want to speak to them, we need to have those people in the room making games. And lastly, one that I think is actually common in a lot of industries, not just games, is moving people into leadership positions, maybe just because they've been there the longest, or maybe because they're a senior, rather than because they actually have the skills to lead. And it's something that's really easy to do, but can really massively impact a team. What we've done at Dinosaur Polo Club to try and mitigate this is we've created 2 pipelines for career progression, so that if you want to become a leader, that's great, and we will train you in leadership before we put you into that position. If you want to be a technical senior, that is fine too, and we will pay you the same, because a lot of people believe that becoming a manager is the next logical step in their career, and that they will be paid more for it. And so they force themselves into a box that doesn't really suit them or their team. But by valuing both equally, we take that pressure off and show them that actually these are all important parts to running any business. I'll stop my rambling and pass on the torch to another person, but it's a big topic, that one.
I have a really quick one. I just wanted to add that culture is one of the main topics we've got to speak about here today, and it's going to change. And I think fiercely trying to stop it from changing is a huge problem. Like we coaching smaller studios, it's very common to hear people talk about, oh, we want to bring some people in, but we really want to protect our culture and make sure the person's a perfect fit for our culture. But I kind of want to slap them on the head a little bit and say, your culture is going to change. It will inherently change. You're a group of friends who all went to school together, and you're going to bring a stranger in who has exactly the skills that you need to solve the problems in front of you right now. But the culture will change when you add a person. A studio that's 10 people or 20 people is inherently different to a studio that's 5. A studio that's making mobile free-to-play games is inherently culturally different to a small close-knit studio making really arty whatever games. Your culture will shift depending on the direction that you're taking, and you have to be okay with that. I think You need to protect your values. I think you can step back from culture a little bit and really care about your core values, but the culture and the feel of the place is going to change. We've just recently ticked over about 130 people at Mighty Kingdom, which is quite explosive growth over the last 6 months. The place feels different now, and that's cool. Like it's weird and it's different, and we're getting used to it. But it's just different now. Like Phil, our managing director, Phil, isn't going to as easily walk through the studio, hang out, jump in, help people solve some programming problems. His role is different now. My role is different now than it was when I started at Mighty Kingdom 6 months ago. And that's okay. We need to be okay with that kind of change, as long as we're always making sure that the changes and the choices that we're making are flowing through our values and our values-based. That's the critical part, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've all covered it really well in terms of the common pitfalls of studios, and I think I don't have much to add, but I guess I kind of see it through a lens of, I think, like you've said, there's can be a real lack of business skills, and I think that is definitely a frequent challenge, and that, you know, it's something that I've seen and heard a lot about from other game devs, as people kind of going, oh, so I'm kind of running the studio, but I actually just want to be making games, and how do I, you know, negotiate that and balance that? So I think that's just really hard, and you just have to find good people to work with who have the skills that maybe you don't have or that you don't want to have, and that's okay. So surrounding yourself with talented people who you can work with to have the full package, I think it's really, really important. And the other side that I think I see sometimes not really happening is the people side, is when things go too business focused and people aren't being looked after or thought about or being treated as a number. And, you know, I think that there is, obviously you need to be able to look at the business side of things, but you need to be able to look at people as well. We don't exist just to work, we exist to live lives that are full of other things. And so I think just having those people skills is really, really important. And again, if you don't have those people skills, you need to find other people who do and make sure that they're there, because I think you've got to have both sides of the coin.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm so glad we've touched upon these points. Got a lot to summarize here, but let's see how we go. So the first thing is I'm so glad that you opened with this, Liam, because you touched upon why I called this talk, which is that you need to stop building your game and start building your studio. And those are two very, very different things. If you're in a position of leadership, you need to put the game down and start focusing on your team, because that's what creates effective studio culture and makes you a good leader. Another big one is the idea that, you know, in a marketing sense, you should always have, you know, a USP, which is a unique selling point. But now people need to start thinking about a unique studio point. How do you differentiate what you're doing to what everyone else is doing? As the market is changing, especially here in Australia with our 30% tax rebate, there's going to be more studios and more products, and it's going to blow up. So you need to have a unique studio point if you expect to retain all those employees and that excellent knowledge that you've been building as a studio. Another one is, you know, some people say always be closing, but I like the idea of always be communicating. Always assume that people do not know your vision. Whatever is in your head should always be on paper or verbally said out loud. Don't assume anyone knows what you're talking about at any given points, because that's the start of every miscommunication problem. The diversity. So diversity is not a box to tick. It is the foundation for success. Diverse people equals diverse ideas, which equals diverse products that do better in the market. It's just that simple. Leadership versus seniority. This is another huge, big one that I talk about all the time. So I'm so glad to hear this come up. I'm loving what's happening in the Dinosaur Polo Club with that, just because that idea that, you know, being a senior and being in a leadership position are not the same thing. Just because you're an excellent programmer does not mean you're an excellent communicator. And to see those as two different pathways is just a brilliant way to do things that I hope every studio adapts. Culture having the ability to evolve, not stay rigid. Why have a Squirtle when you could have a Blastoise? You should always have the ability to evolve. No matter how great you think your culture is, it could always be better. And lastly, remember your people are people, not product makers. Never see people as numbers on a spreadsheet, because it just doesn't work well. You need to have empathy. You need to understand all of your people and where they're coming from and what motivates them in order to lead a team. Which leads me to my next point, which is, if you could boil your studio culture down to a 3-ingredient recipe, what would it be? And I'm going to start with Chantel.
Okay, I might be cheeky and expand it to 4 ingredients, if that's okay. Because we actually spent quite a bit of time at Dinosaur Polo Club a couple of years ago with our team developing our studio pillars. And we have found these incredibly useful and valuable to the studio and the team, because we use them to help govern how we make games, how we look after each other, and how we make our business decisions. So I can quickly run you through those 4 studio pillars. So the first, and it's the first for a reason, is we support our people, nurturing careers so our dinos feel valued and valuable, instilling kindness, empathy, agency, and responsibility, providing a supportive, inclusive, and diverse team environment that values open communication. So that's number 1. The second is we strive for long-term stability, making sensible and reasoned business decisions, taking measured risks to keep thriving, and being internally transparent to preserve and grow trust. We felt this one was incredibly important because we are in an industry that's always in flux. So for us, making sure that we can always give our people jobs and that stability to know that they can get a mortgage and they don't have to worry about it is something that guides a huge amount of our business decisions. The third is that we create high quality, polished games together, creating approachable, distinctive games that we're proud to have worked on, making games that are sincere and respectful of people's time, aiming to provide opportunities for furthering everyone's career goals. And the fourth is we support our communities. So engaging and supporting our players, offering resources, mentorship, and support to our fellow game devs, and being conscious of our impact on our environment. And spending the time to develop these pillars was incredibly important. We spent about 6 months actually refining them down, because we knew that once we created them, if we were changing them every year, they would become meaningless. So it was really important to do that process with input from the team, so that once we had them set, they would stay with us forever. So that's our, not quite 3, but 4 key ingredients.
Zoe, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I likewise literally just took our 3 of our 6 brand values that we also spend a lot of time working on and developing and really thought about. And because I was trying to do this and I was like, oh, it's so hard to fit it into 3. And I actually talked to some of our team about it. And after I got the answer of karaoke, donuts, and coffee, the next answer I got was basically cheating a little bit by using our brand values to sum this up into 3. So one of our brand values is a diverse, inclusive, and supportive culture. And I think that is like absolutely essential as an ingredient, and obviously covers quite a clear perspective and a clear direction. And covers quite a lot of things about how we work at Runaway in terms of being really supportive, being really respectful, having a really safe environment, having an environment where we're lifting each other up. I think that's, very important. Second one is building a culture of excellence. And so for us, that value is about both the work that we're doing, but also the seriousness that we sort of treat our jobs with in terms of looking after ourselves. We have a no crunch culture. We need to look after ourselves really, really well in order to come to work and do a good job. And that's something that I think our team's really great at encouraging each other to do. And also, doing good work when we're at work, making good games, making stable games that are, known to be good products. Professional development as well, in terms of continuing to work on ourselves so that we can do bigger and better. And the third thing for us is creating a trusted brand for life. And that's about the fact that we want to make a portfolio of games that people can keep coming back to, and that people know what to expect when they play a runaway game, and they will treat it as that place that is their happy place. That's what we want our games to be. And I think that goes both into the product, but also into the studio, in terms of if as a studio brand value, we're trying to create a trusted brand for life. That speaks a lot about how we treat each other and how we run our studio. So those were our three, and our other three brand values relate directly to the type of games that we make. So I was like, oh, look at that, that's great. I can steal that for this answer.
I'll jump in. I cheated a little. I didn't cheat. I just found it hard to condense this down to 3 points. So because we have 7 values on our website, and there's a lot more that goes into MK than just what's written there. So I kind of decided to just list things that matter to me as just another employee at Mighty Kingdom. So diverse, inclusive, and supportive. I think we should kind of all have that now. And if your studio doesn't, why doesn't it? Maybe you should have a good think about that. I love the fact that all of our staff are trusted rather, to find and propose cool changes and valuable changes to the studio, regardless of seniority. In fact, quite recently, one of our recently brought in grads proposed some quite significant and very important changes, and we're working on implementing them now. And that's beautiful that they felt safe to raise that and get those ideas out there, so that we could kind of get value from them immediately. The ideas, it was really special. And kindness first, always. Important too. We want to make sure that every decision that we make is being kind to our people and kind to our players and kind to our business partners and publishers and to everything. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We still need to make money. We still need to protect each other's jobs and make sure that we're trending upwards. But we want to do that in a kind way, in every possible opportunity in front of us. So those are the 3 that I could come up with.
Yeah, similarly, I thought about going to our sort of studio values and then was like, no, I want to see if I can come up with something that's, sort of more recent, I guess. Like what is the thing right now? As I thought about it, I think like the one that came to mind, because like our first studio value, similar to almost everyone else here, is like people first, and then product, and then process. But for me, it was, number 1 is like communication and the pursuit of psychological safety. Psychological safety is crucial to healthy workplaces and healthy lives. We need to be able to have conflict and disagreement in safe and healthy ways. Second, we should reflect the diversity of our audience, both in our games and our team. The audience for games is incredibly diverse and becoming more diverse all the time. And so a lot of our hiring processes, the way we do outreach, etc., is very thoughtful in terms of like trying to be inclusive and reach out to different communities. And I'm really proud of our team. Every time we make a post on Twitter or something like that, like we get to do stuff that not a lot of people have done, and that's like really special. And finally, sort of always be striving to learn, grow, and become the best version of ourselves, and supporting each other to do that. And these 3 things aren't things I necessarily like set out initially when sort of David and I were starting our values. These are things that have sort of evolved from the team, and they're things that make me very proud to work at Summerthorpe.
Fantastic. Okay, so there's a lot to cover here. So I've just been jotting down just some bullet points of all the sort of values that we've come up with. So we've got empathy, trust, clarity, diversity, supportive culture, inclusiveness, avoiding crunch, kindness, learning and growing, being people first, having psychological safety, prioritizing mental health. And then my favorite 2 points, not having a 3-point list, and that donuts, coffee, and karaoke help.
Always, every time.
Every time, without fail. So we're rounding out to the end of our talk now. So I just want to go one by one across to everyone, just for any final points on building studios, starting with Chantel, top left.
I suppose there's a lot of things that I hope everyone takes away from this talk, and it is really just about, there are no real secrets. I suppose it's about putting your people first and simply being thorough in all things. That in itself is certainly no simple task, but making sure that you have shared values as a team, that you're always seeking input from everyone, that you're working towards common goals together, and that you positively but realistically manage the expectations of your team as well as your external partners, and that you encourage learning, that you plan for everything, and above all, that you go into every situation knowing that you can always be better and strive to do so.
Liam.
I think if there's one thing I would add, it's that the most effective way to lead a team is to understand yourself and work on your issues. Because if we don't actively deal with our own traumas and psychological issues, we will project them onto the company and the team. The company then sort of becomes a reflection of the shadow version of ourselves, and often all of the worst parts of ourselves, the things we don't like, will play out. For example, if you really hate conflict and go out of your way to avoid conflict at all costs, the company culture can very easily become passive aggressive, because there's no accepted way for people to deal with conflict and they don't see it modeled. Whether we want to or not, as leaders, we lead by example. We don't get a choice in that. As a leader, you're the barometer for what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. People unconsciously look to you for guidance on how to behave, how to handle stress, how to handle success. We must pay attention to what we do and say. It's our responsibility as leaders. Like, it's probably the biggest thing that I've learned over the course of starting Summer Fall. And I can't overstate how important it is for everyone to fully understand themselves and deal with their issues. Go to therapy. Starting a games company is not an excuse to not go to therapy.
Thanks, Liam. All right, and Jason.
Two really quick things. One is ego. Put it in the toilet. You don't deserve it. Like, you might be one of the most experienced people in your studio if you're a leader, but that doesn't mean you know everything, and it certainly doesn't mean you have the best path forward in this current moment. So put your ego aside and listen to your team, because they probably have better ideas than you, or at least different ones that will help kind of flavor or season your ideas. The other is invest in yourself as a leader. So if the studio pays for people to do professional development, please make sure that you're paying for yourself to do some professional development as a leader. Read a book, get some Brené Brown up here. Go, like, you need to, you really need to go to a course, invest in it, because it will make you better at it. You may only, take away 10% of any course or any book that you read, but that 10% can make a huge difference to the impact that you have on the people around you, or at least give you the inspiration that you need to start thinking differently and more conscientiously about how you lead the people around you. It's vital.
Brilliant. And Zoe.
Yeah, I think I really agree with the ego thing. Assume that there's a lot that you don't know, and hire people who know better, and then listen to them, and give them the autonomy to lead those decisions. I think that that's something I really appreciate coming into games from outside of games, is that I assume that I know nothing, and I am just trying to help coordinate all the other people who are wonderful and talented and who, know more than me about all of these things. So I think coming in with that attitude is really positive as a leader, and really great for your team as well, to feel really trusted, because why else would you hire them? Also, just hires, we haven't really talked about that, but just hiring is the absolute foundation of, who comes into your studio, and the people in your studio make your studio. So be very careful, take your time, don't hire in a rush, listen to red flags and listen to your gut. And then I think from a leadership perspective, last thing is just do what you say you're going to do. Because far too often I think people talk the talk, but they don't actually follow through. And that's something that I think is really, really important for you to be respected by your team, and to actually just do the things that you know you need to do to build the studio and to make things work, because too often it's like goes on a list and you don't follow through. So follow through.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're hard up against time now, so I'm going to round out this panel by thanking all of our panelists. Thank you to Chantel Cole, Liam Essler, Jason Imms, and Zoe Hobson, and I've been Kerry Hutton. Thanks for coming.